Scientists have recently proposed a novel principle called the spatial computing. The main question that led these scientists to come up with this novel principle is the fact that how is it that the interplay and interactions of both gamma waves and beta waves play in the working memory when they are supposed to encode, retrieve, and control the flow of information that goes into the working memory. How do these gamma and beta waves know which individual neurons to interact with or which network of neurons they should interact? In other words, how can our brain waves be selective enough to know what part of our cortex and neural networks they should interact with for specific items that either enter or exit our working memory? If you remember, in the last videos, we talked about the role of both gamma and beta waves in working memory based on some of the most recent and top-notch studies that have been published recently. In those videos, we covered how gamma waves have turned out to be the ones that encode information when it retrieves it from the outside and from the sensory system, and beta waves are the gatekeepers that let information come in or out of the working memory. We also discussed how beta waves appear to be the ones that control the top-down type of information, and top-down type of information is where there are some general rules that we habitually seem to know, but these are actually being controlled by not only the neural networks but also our brainwave signals. And so overall, there seemed to be an interplay and interaction between beta brainwaves and gamma brainwaves when it comes to encoding information, reading out information, and deleting information from our working memory. And working memory is where we are intentionally thinking about something. We are intentionally having a thought, maybe because we want to make a decision or we want to pay attention to something. We also discussed how beta and gamma waves appear to increase and decrease depending on what the working memory is doing at that moment. And so, for example, when we are getting information into the working memory and the information is being encoded into the working memory, beta waves appear to decrease and gamma waves increase. And if you remember, this is mainly because gamma waves are responsible to bring in information from the external sensory systems and encode it into our working memory. And also, if, for example, the information is no longer relevant and we don't need it to be in the working memory anymore, it appears that the beta waves increase and gamma waves decrease because, again, beta waves appear to have the role of a gatekeeper of the working. Now, going back to the initial major question that we started this video with in terms of why is spatial computing important as a new principle to be thinking about, is mainly because scientists are wondering how is it that our brain waves then selectively know which neurons or which maybe network of neurons they should interact with when they are working with the working memory, in this case holding a thought or deleting a thought. In spatial computing, the assumption is that the item that is within the working memory is being moved consistently across the cortical network and assigning or moving a thought across the cortical neural network of the brain is considered a computation in and of itself. And so the control comes into play as to where in the neural network of the cortex the working memory is actually held. And knowing where a thought is spatially placed within the cortex of the brain will allow then these operations to be made on the thought itself. And the plasticity of this function allows us to operate on the working memory items without knowing exactly where in the neural network the thought was formed initially. And the spatial computing in this case then is mediated by the interplay of gamma and beta waves across all of the neural networks. The spatial computing principle also suggests that since information is organized spatially and across the neural networks, it leaves the control and operations of the working memory and the items within the working memory to the beta and gamma waves, which in turn are low dimensional. On the other hand, it suggests that the identity of an item within a working memory is not carried out by the gamma and beta waves, but instead it is stored within the individual neurons itself, because we can see that through the spiking of either an individual neuron or a network of neurons. In other words, the spatial computing principle suggests that the control operations of a thought in our working memory is done through our brain waves, gamma or beta waves, but the identity of the thought is carried out by the individual neuron itself, by the spiking of the neuron itself. So the operations happening within the working memory, such as encoding, maintaining, or deleting, happens by the brain waves, beta and or gamma waves that are low dimensional, but the identity of the item, of a thought in our working memory, is controlled by the physical neuron itself through the spiking of a neuron or a neural network. To sum up, the spatial computing principle suggests that low dimensional brainwaves activities control the operation of a thought entering our working memory. Operations such as encoding the information, retrieving the information, and or deleting the information, and high dimensional neural spikes activity controls the identity of a thought, identity of an item within our working memory, which is our intentional thoughts about something.